Hey everybody, it's Pineapple, and we're going to talk about this week's chapter spoilers for My Hero Academia Chapter 333. I missed you guys last week, but I think I ended up talking about the chapter in like a review or something, right? But this week, you don't want to miss it. It's bad. It's bad. Not bad as in the chapter is bad. The chapter is amazing. It's just kind of like, it's bad for somebody, and I feel like you're going to easily be able to tell who it is really quickly here. But it's not just bad for one person. I think All For One gets his fair share of bad things happening to him in this chapter, which is always really good to see. So let's just go right off. I got the chapter actual scans from Just Explode on Twitter, and the actual summary from Atsushi. So we're going to go over it and just talk about what's available right now. I feel like a lot of people get really angry about like manga leaks and stuff, but I see you people on Twitter talking about Spider-Man anytime there's a leak or anything. So really, what room do you have to complain here? Let's just get into it. All right, so the chapter begins with Shigaraki / All For One saying that he absolutely did not want New Order to meet with One For All. Furthermore, his original plan was to first steal One For All and then go after New Order. That makes a lot of sense because there's just a lot of trouble that could occur when you have Star meeting Deku, right? Like, Shigaraki has already gone up against Deku. All For One currently, we know that All For One was thinking about Deku the entire time he was in prison and thinking about plans, whatever he was going to do to take Deku down. We know that Deku represents a very clear threat, right, to All For One and Shigaraki, and, you know, just, of course, right, because you have all the vestiges, you have the whole lineage of All Might stepping in and nearly taking All For One down. So, of course, the only threat that he really has to worry about, even if he's going to say he's useless and you chose the wrong person, is Deku. And having someone like Deku meet with Star and Stripe, who could do anything, right? She could apply a rule to Deku to make him stronger. She could apply a rule to Deku to make it so maybe the quirk couldn't be stolen. She could, you know what I mean? Like, just them fighting together at the same time might have been obviously too much to handle. Because imagine if, like, you have this giant fight with Star and Stripe, not to turn this into a chapter discussion, but you have this giant fight with Star and Stripe. Imagine if Deku was there helping, right? Like, the giant air guardian is holding Shigaraki down or all this stuff, and then you have Deku just working in kicks and all sorts of crazy stuff with Fajin. So that was something that could not be allowed to happen. Star and Deku meeting, or New Order and One For All, really, more specifically meeting. But, yeah, like that, I completely understand why Shigaraki / All For One felt that way. And I also think it's interesting that he, like, talks about them as their quirks instead of like the person, right? He's like, New Order and One For All cannot meet, which is of course how All For One looks at people, because, you know, he's the guy who wants all the quirks. So Star's recklessness threatened to make that scenario a reality where she was going to meet Deku, and forced him to act even with his body in an incomplete state. Shigaraki has his hand on her face and he says that this is it. He stole New Order. So let's look over at, I'm going to look over at the actual scans. We see Shigaraki looking all crazy, healing back up and whatnot. We see a panel of Star and Stripe next to Deku. They're kind of standing together, which is something that I guess we're never going to get to see. And then we see a bunch of, you know, tech stuff, bunch of stuff, you know, symbolizing elephant, crushing ants and whatnot. And then we see the actual moment, right, where Shigaraki, he has his hand on her face. A lot of people last week, they had like their big severe doubts over whether her quirk was going to get stolen, over whether she was going to be gone this chapter. I was pretty sure, right? I was pretty sure that it was going to be done for Star, but let's see how that happens, or if that happens. So Star has, you know, hand on the face right here from Shigaraki. Shigaraki like pulls it away, and then we see like a little bit of aura or something, or some sort of energy kind of come off Star into Shigaraki's hand, which is what we know, like, they have that hole there, the All For One users, that quirks pretty much get sucked into, it seems. So yeah, it seems that Shigaraki was aware that this would be a very difficult fight, or like Shigaraki All For One was aware that this would be a very difficult fight, because it says that her recklessness almost caused a situation that he had to force himself to step in and stop, even though he knows that his body isn't complete. So Shigaraki / All For One knows that, like, hey, this might actually not be possible to take Star down, but because she's on her way to Japan right now, I have to. Like, I have to step in, even if I'm not complete, even if whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen, I have to step in right now and take Star down before she meets One For All and starts, you know, drumming up support and all this kind of stuff. I have to take her down immediately, even if I'm not sure that I'm capable of doing that, which is very un-All For One like, right? All of his plans tend to be pretty surefire. So again, Shigaraki has his hand on her face and said that he stole New Order. However, in the last few seconds, Star tries to create a new order, saying Kathleen bait will not be turned into dust. Or is it Cassie in the official translation? I can't tell what it is. I don't remember, honestly. But pretty much she tries to make it so she can't be decayed, like everyone has been suggesting she does, right? I remember Zahal A bunch of people have been telling me that the smartest thing for her to do would make it so that, you know, she just says, I cannot be decayed, right? Or something like that. And Horikoshi, obviously, being smart, doesn't just ignore that, right? To just have her die and have that make no sense. He actually shows us what would happen if she tried doing that, right? And it seems like she tries doing that, but it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't keep her from decaying, so she has to, like, try something else. And what she tries, we're going to get to in this chapter, is pretty crazy, but it doesn't seem like her trying to keep herself from decaying is something that she could do within the limits of her quirk, right? Like, as her quirk is being stolen or whatever that's going on, it seems like, as we were told before, like, the amount of life force or whatever she has compared to the amount of power that she can draw, she can't draw enough power to keep herself from getting decayed, which I guess makes sense because it's also lessening the amount of life force, I would assume, that she has, because she's literally being decayed. So it's kind of like, that's a hard counter, really. That's kind of tough. All For One says that she could have protected her body or her quirk, which is something that you've heard a lot on this channel, since she couldn't create a rule that covers both, and ended up choosing her own body. He says that he's won, and that now he'll really be able to create the fantastic world of the comic books that he read with his brother. And from here in the chapter, we see Shigaraki knocking Star away, doing a whole bunch of talking and stuff, you know, looking really, really happy and excited with the one Shigaraki eye and the one All For One eye, or, you know, whatever that symbolism is kind of like. And we actually see a flashback. At first I thought it was like young All For One. It probably, like, maybe it is, right? But I'm pretty sure it's young Yoichi. I just, like, when I looked at it the first time, I assumed maybe Yoichi and All For One at a certain point looked very similar, right? With All For One having the long hair, and that would kind of also go into why he's cool with Shigaraki having the long white hair and all that stuff. But no, I do think it is the first user reading the Captain Hero comics that we see, and it kind of calls back to, we know All For One only read up to the 3rd volume of this Captain Hero series that has really, really shaped the way that he sees the world and that how he wants to change the world. Like, the Demon King wins over the villain or over the hero or something in that series by volume 3, and that's how he wants to turn the world into. It's kind of like Garo, right? Where Garo is like, well, monsters always lose. Why? Like, why? Why do monsters always have to lose? Wouldn't it be cool if a monster won? And then, like, through that, he kind of becomes a monster in One Punch Man. I feel like it's kind of that same thing. Like, a kind of similar thing of All For One, where All For One's like, this is so cool that this villain won in this comic. I want to make the world like this. And his brother read the continuation, and he was like, no, like, that's not how it works. The heroes win in the end. And I feel like All For One not reading the rest of that comic is actually going to be part of his downfall, but that is kind of just like a whatever thing. So then Shigaraki tries to go on to use New Order, and he says, New Order, the atmosphere will... But before Shigaraki is able to finish the sentence, he's inside of Vestige World. Like, you know, the world where Deku and Shigaraki had their most recent kind of conflict with All For One. We keep seeing All For One fusing with Shigaraki, right? Star and Stripe is standing in that world. Now, if you remember, All For One tells us that anytime he steals someone's quirk, their personality or like their vestige or like a part of their spirit or something is still in there technically, right? Like, they haunt him in his dreams, they're still there. And we see like some more of that in this chapter, but this is like a very direct visual kind of approach to showing us that. When All For One steals somebody's quirk, it seems like a spiritual kind of vestige version of them, or like, you know, pretty much the part that is of their quirk, because we know that that's how it works thanks to One For All and stuff, comes into the vestige space and is going to be dominated or whatever by Shigaraki / All For One, because you've seen other previous users in this vestige space and they're all completely blacked out and they look like they fuse with the world, right? They're part of the All For One space or whatever. Here instead you have Star and Stripe standing there. Oh, you don't even know what you just did, man. Is this my new home? Let's go off. And from within All For One, she starts fighting back. Because apparently, allegedly, what we learn here, let me read the text so I can get that accurate. What we end up seeing is Shigaraki, after seeing Star and Stripe inside of his body, we see like Shigaraki kind of, you know, the weird fuse of All For One version, pulling him away and stuff, trying to reach after Star to take her quirk inside the quirk space. And he does technically have the quirk. We see him trying to use the quirk. We see him like with some sort of like fire or something in his hand. We see him saying something about the atmosphere. It looked like maybe he was gonna like burn the atmosphere or something like that. Crazy, it's something nuts. But we see him try to use it and have like the lines in his text box, so it is confirmed that he has it. But Star Trek actually does a very big brain play here. So what she does is she makes it so that her quirk, New Order, rages against other quirks. So what that means is, with one of her rules, she pretty much made it so that anyone who gets her quirk, New Order, she is inside the vestige space, fighting All for One. Like raging, not just All for One, but like all the quirks inside of All for One. So what that gives us is everyone is saying, how do you defeat Shigaraki? How do you defeat All for One? How is Deku going to beat All for One? How is Deku going to beat All Shigaraki? Shigaraki is unbeatable and whatnot. And what I've been saying for a little while is I feel like the key is definitely in the vestige space, because I definitely think that they're going to have to take down All for One inside Shigaraki and All for One outside of Shigaraki. And in this chapter, we got our first very, very big hint on how that's going to happen, right? You have Star inside of the vestige space, pretty much fighting all of the quirks, like all the different quirk users that All for One has ever called on to take their quirks before, right? Fighting All for One, ripping him apart from Shigaraki. Who knows what that's gonna do? Does it like lower their percentage, or does that delay their union or their fusion or whatever? Is that like a way for Shigaraki to be free, right? There's just a lot of questions, but we see that there's just this giant kind of like Star and Stripe apparition inside of All for One that kind of also looks a little almighty, right? Like it's like I think it's described as the ghost of All Might, even though it's not literally the ghost of All Might. Star's force of nature here, right? She is like All Might so much here, and inspired by All Might so much here, that she ends up being the only person besides All Might that is actually able to throw such a big wrench in All for One's plans and make him so afraid. In this chapter, All for One is freaking out. All for One is freaking out in a big way in this chapter, because again, Shigaraki tries to use the quirk, then Shigaraki starts exploding and like bubbling up and all sorts of stuff, and all the lasers start attacking him, and then from the inside you have Star literally attacking you have All for One and Shigaraki are like fused together, right? And then as Star is inside the quirk dimension trying to fight All for One and Shigaraki, you have all these like dead quirk users, right? Like all the different individual quirk users that are still inside of All for One, they all start coming out of the ground like shadowy creatures and holding on to Star and like pulling her back and like attacking her. And I think that's just awesome. And I think it's also awesome that seemingly when she destroys one of those creatures or one of those people, All for One loses access to the quirk. And in general, we see that Shigaraki's body is like facing a mighty bit of recoil. Like it looks like his whole body is just constantly exploding. He's being hit by the lasers. I think this is kind of trouble. I think this is kind of trouble for Shigaraki, which is good because Horikoshi needed to introduce some sort of way for people to feel like Shigaraki is not entirely unbeatable, right? There had to be something. And I've been saying for a little bit that I think the way Deku is going to beat Shigaraki / All for One is inside the vestige space. I think he's pretty much going to give Shigaraki one for all. Just give it to him. Just like kind of how Star's plan here was to give Shigaraki New Order, just kind of deal with it. I feel like that's absolutely the route Deku's going to go. They're going to do a whole giant battle with all the class and everyone and Shigaraki and stuff. And at the end of it, once he's exhausted, once he's worn down, Deku is going to give Shigaraki one for all. And then they're going to fight inside the vestige world with all the vestiges fighting against All for One / Shigaraki to try and separate them and somehow remove the All for One quirk or imprison the All for One quirk inside of Shigaraki. And remember, vestige space stuff between Shigaraki and Deku takes place in like a split second, right? Like he tries to steal the quirk, stealing the quirk is pretty instant. They have like whole conversations and all sorts of stuff in that time. It's kind of like when Naruto and Sasuke clash, but that is the chapter. Let me just make sure I get the full summary read so I make sure I didn't miss anything. She realized So Shigaraki again tries to use New Order. His body twitches and explodes. Star says that she realized that blowing up her friend's jet would not be enough to kill Shiggy, so she created a rule directly on her quirk saying New Order will revolt against other quirks. We then see a page showing a monstrous version of Star fighting multiple silhouettes inside the vestiges of All for One. She said she didn't let her quirk be stolen to protect herself, but rather to finish off All for One from within himself. Between putting an end to a global threat and getting out of this fight alive, the answer couldn't be more obvious. She thanks her friends for all they've done for her so far. All for One can't get around the situation because all he could do is steal and give quirks. He can't simply delete them. He even considers giving them to the pilots, but they shoot him with their lasers. They say that Star is still fighting until now, and they can't let her sacrifice be in vain. Oh, and also, All for One even thinks about doing something to stop the lasers, but the inner Star quirk has just destroyed the reflect quirk, and while the real Star is almost fully turned into dust, she thanks All Might. He's the one who saved her and introduced her to this wonderful dream, and now she's returning the favor. Shigaraki / All for One is desperate, saying that he needs to find a way out as soon as possible. He calls Star the haunting image of All Might, or the ghost of All Might, right? And the lasers keep shooting at him while the Nomu is flying nearby. So, again, this is the biggest corner that we've seen All for One placed in, right? He's in a situation where all these different jets are shooting at him with these lasers. It seems like he's potentially able to lose quirks here, right? Like, he can't delete any quirks, but because Star's Quirk New Order is raging against other quirks, it seems like she is getting rid of quirks inside of the vestige space, maybe, and that would be a very big problem if Shigaraki lost not Decay, if he lost regeneration. That levels the playing field in a very, very big way, because we've seen that they can damage Shigaraki, it's just making it stick, right? So if Star somehow gets rid of regeneration, which I think is actually, this might just be a problem moving forward, right? I feel like Shigaraki isn't going to off-screen deal with this Star and Stripe situation, right? I feel like Star and Stripe is now like a virus, or New Order, I should say, is now like a virus inside of All for One. And I did say in one of my other videos, I think it was one of the 5 ways to use Star and Stripe, I did say that, like, Star could probably do a thing where she made her quirk poisonous, right? Where she was like, whoever has my quirk dies, or whoever has my quirk, something like that. And it's really, really good to see that she did that here, because one, because Shigaraki can't technically use the quirk, right? I don't think he could just take the rule off, right? He can't just create 2 rules that take that rule away. And maybe since it's a rule that she created, even though the quirk was taken, it's technically not a rule that he can undo. You know what I mean? We really don't know. And that's, I really love it, because again, it represents like a big weakness in Shigaraki / All for One. And it gives me hope that, again, we are going to see a final battle. Now, a lot of people are saying that, like, you know, Shigaraki is going to be saved by Deku. We're not going to see a final battle. Everyone puts it into like an either or, right? I feel like we are going to see a final battle. We're going to see a giant battle with everyone fighting Shigaraki, and then we're going to see some sort of one-on-one kind of fight between Deku and Shigaraki, and then we're going to see an in the vestige world fight between Deku, Shigaraki, All for One, all the vestiges and stuff like that. And I really, really think that that's something that we have to see, because they have to get rid of All for One inside the vestige space, and I think that Deku is kind of the most poised to do it outside of Star and Stripe from this chapter, because it seems like she's ready to rampage within All for One. So that is, I believe, everything. I think I covered everything in like a record amount of time or something. We didn't go super long. So that is everything that I could possibly say about this chapter. Rest in peace, Star and Stripes. When she goes out doing the salute, looking at all her friends who are still fighting for her, trying to kill All for One with their lasers and everything. But Star and Stripe is actually gone in this chapter. She's gone. She is actually dead. Although the kind of weird spirit version of her is inside of the Quirk fighting All for One, that's not a way that I think she's going to get revived or anything like that. You know, anything kind of in that direction. I really just feel like it goes more in line with All for One telling us before that when he sleeps, he's haunted by the personalities of the people whose quirks he steals, and now we see that he can actually use, like if someone invades All for One or something, he can use the other quirk users as like an army of the dead. And think about how scary that is, that All for One has taken so many quirks over the years, and, you know, over decades and all sorts of stuff, and now Shigaraki has the original version of his quirk, and All for One, even with Shigaraki being the quirk user, is able to summon like an army of quirk users, that like people who he was like, hey, if I ever need a favor, you got me, right? And now, even in death, they are fulfilling their favor by protecting him against Star and Stripe, which I think is really, really morbid. It goes back into All for One kind of being like this Hades, king of the underworld figure. And I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. I do not know what is going to happen next chapter, because we thought that this fight was going to be completely over, and it is over. But now it seems like Shigaraki is in a place where, like, the lasers are actually doing something, right? Like, and he's in danger maybe of losing regeneration. And there's also the danger of Star maybe splitting All For One and Shigaraki inside the vestige space, because we've seen the two of them are pretty much like this now, right? Like All For One's whole body is like fused with Shigaraki, but at one point in this chapter, she like pulls All For One to the point where it looks like his entire torso is separated from Shigaraki, right? And I wonder what kind of effect that has just on their union. I mean, that's probably why we saw him bloating up and like exploding and everything. His body is just not handling whatever is going on very well. But like, how long is that going to last? Is Shigaraki just going to be like literally incapable of doing anything? Is Endeavor going to pull up and get like a rematch? Like, what's going to happen here? So let me know what you think is going to happen. Let me know if you think Shigaraki is going to somehow conquer this situation with Star and Stripe. If you think the situation with Star and Stripe is going to somehow be the reason that Shigaraki is separated from All For One and gets his, like, you know, personality back or his control back over himself. If you think these pilots are all dead, right? Because they all stuck around to attack Shigaraki with lasers, and it seems like it's working for now, but who knows? Or if you think Endeavor is going to show up and save the day or something, or just how you think this chapter could possibly end, or, you know, next chapter could possibly start or end, and I don't know. But let me know what you think. Well, let me know what you think about the craziness, by the way, of just all the vestige kind of stuff going on in this chapter, and if you kind of agree with me and think that Deku in the vestige world is going to be how we're going to pretty much close the series out, by taking out vestige All For One, right? Like, so let me know if you agree with any of that. Thank you, Justice, and thank you, Atsushi, for, you know, providing the information. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. It's Pineapple. Love you.